center of the city. Here we find the great marketplace, a tourist's paradise filled with all kinds of strange and wonderful wares. And on the right, the palace of Aladdin, owner of the famous magic lamp. It is rumored that his beautiful daughter is very unhappy, despite all their riches.
From KOYR Studios in Minneapolis, Minnesota, it's Arcade Radio. Intruder alert, intruder alert.
Control tower to carpet. All clear for landing.
Welcome to the Arcade Radio Podcast. Today is March 30th, 2017, and it is now approximately 8:18 CDT. Thanks for joining us in the Arcadosphere. This is your host, Captain Fantastic. I'm joined by the legendary Dan Reed, Temporal Displacement Expert Mark, Time Runner Shields. And the illustrious guest of the Arcade Radio Podcast this week is Mr. Randy Donahue, former employee of Aladdin's Castle and Bally Entertainment. Welcome to the show. And episode 13.
Hello.
Tell us who you are, Randy.
Thrilled to be here. This is Randy Donahue, formerly of Aladdin's Castle and Bally Gaming.
Excellent. Welcome to the show. Mark.
Hi, Mark Shields. Well, Time Runner 88 on the K-Love, TimeMachineRental.com, UncleRicosVan.com, the Arcade Hangouts, Meet the Time Runners, Bob Zarzadeck does stuff.
It's a lot and some Spider-Man stuff.
Spider-Man, I'm not Spider-Man, parody something. Whatever I call it, it's like this very long name so that Disney doesn't find me.
Or Sony, right? There's like a split ownership there, I suppose.
Well, Marvel's like, oh, it's so complicated. Let's just not go there.
And the legendary Dan Reed.
Hi guys.
I'm Dan Reed. I have Journey, tape recorder board, and
dang it, Journey thing.
Dan might not join us today. It's very sad. Yeah, he went and got a medical procedure done.
That's right.
Yeah.
They're lengthening it. No, wait.
I don't know where you're going with this, but it's interesting. Do tell.
I can't go into it. There's a HIPAA compliance and all that. So, sorry. We got to move on.
So, does that mean we're going to have to skip the arcade news?
We save it, and if he shows up, we'll let him do it.
Hey, well, let's just reverse it. Maybe we'll start with the Wayback Machine today. What do you think?
I like that.
All right. I'm down.
Do it.
Randy, are you down with it? Wait, we didn't talk about what we were going to work on. We're working
let's talk about that.
Okay.
We left that out last week.
Yeah, we did, because we were in a hurry. So, real quick, I've sold 2 Sprint 2s. And 2 Sprint 2s? And 280 Zap. Oh, yeah, and I was involved with this little Pac-Man thing over the weekend. Yeah, that's what I've been working on.
Well, I installed my Empire Strikes Back kit in my Star Wars that I've had for 6 months. Yes.
Is it the Vector Labs one?
Correct.
Sweet. So you get.
I did it in about 14 minutes.
It's so cool. So tell us how it works.
You hold down the left front button and the right front button for 3 seconds each, and then
the triggers.
Okay. Well, the ones that are on the front, so the thumb buttons, I guess.
Oh, see, I would call those on the back.
Right.
So the thumb buttons, you hold those down for how many seconds?
3 seconds. 3 seconds each, and then it switches games. And it's pretty smooth. It's 4 little daughter boards, and you end up taking out so many ROMs. It's hilarious. It was a fun upgrade, and it fired right up the first time.
Sweet. I love it. Randy, what are you working on right now?
Arcade related. I'm currently looking for a project. I've got basically cabinet guts, and I'm looking for a cabinet with a monitor.
All right, tell us what game you got.
Well, my wife used to go to the arcade. I won't say fairly often, but her favorite game was a game called Columns.
Oh yeah, I love
It was
Columns.
it was kind of like a Tetris wannabe, and so
Pre-Bejeweled.
yeah, so she's always she's been pestering me for like the last 30 years that we've been moving around, and I have this board and all the material in a big box that we keep moving. I keep telling her one day I'll build it. And,
So you have the marquee and the board and the
yeah, I got pretty much everything to put it together, and my thought was that I'd just be able to buy a game cabinet someday from Aladdin's, and then of course they went out of business on it. So that cut down my immediate local supplier of games or cabinets. So
well, you're in Worthington or that area?
yeah, north of Worthington, about 15 miles, in a metropolis of Fulda, Minnesota.
How far are you from Mankato?
I am approximately 90 miles. I go there fairly often.
Okay, so here's the deal. We have a good buddy who's a collector there. He could probably source a cabinet for you that would work with your Columns guts. So if you're interested, we could try to hook you up with him.
Yeah, that'd be great.
That'd be awesome. I'll let him know.
Okay.
Speaking of which, I had a little conversation with Walter Day before the show, and he's interested in making you a superstar. He thinks it's totally awesome that you were a roving manager, which we'll get to in our interview. Superstar. But you were a roving manager of Aladdin's and Bally arcades in the day, so that's pretty awesome. Walter Day reaching out and saying, "Hey, I can make a card for this guy." So shoot me your picture, and we'll make a card.
That would be great. The something else I can post on Instagram.
That'd be awesome.
Yeah.
So Dan Reed, what are you working on?
I'm working in my basement on my crawl. I don't know.
Poor Dan.
I'm making him sound very kind of dumb. I should stop doing it. I should do more of a better impression.
Just be real negative.
Here, I'll do it. Shut up, Adam.
You have to swear a lot. You have to swear a lot.
You. It doesn't matter what I'm doing.
That's the first time you've ever sworn on this show.
Oh, darn. I was doing so well.
It was the end of an era.
I know. Well, I wasn't me. It wasn't me. I was doing a Dan impression, so it's all good.
That's great. Oh my gosh. So normally we would jump into some news, but I think without Dan here, we're going to have to skip his segment and maybe come back to it. What do you think?
No biggie. I'm in.
Back in '82, I used to be able to throw a pigskin a quarter mile.
Back to the Cade with Time Runner.
Why are things so heavy in the future? Is there a problem with the Earth's gravitational pull?
Hey everybody, welcome to Back to the Cade. Yeah. We're going to jump into the DeLorean time machine. Don't hit your head on that gull-wing door.
I'm trying not to.
Everybody does it once at least.
Ow. Ow.
God.
Son of a biscuit cake.
The day we're going back in time to will be March 30th, 1984. That is, 33 years?
It's longer than I want to admit.
It's about 33 years, Doc. Okay. So first, let's talk about a little bit of technology stuff, and all of it is bad. IBM had released a IBM PC Junior this month in an attempt to enter the home computer market. I can't believe that they're saying this. It had improved sound and graphics over the original business-oriented IBM PC, but it was a commercial failure.
So it's interesting that was 3 years after the introduction of the PC with probably DOS 1.10 that Mr. Bill Gates sold to him.
Yeah, I don't know why he thought this was a good idea. I mean, I would have called it something else, but I never saw one in person. Not to be outdone by IBM Texas Instruments, the month that the PC Junior was introduced, they decided they could not compete in the home computer market and threw in the towel on the Texas Instruments 99.4A.
Which actually, one of our most loyal listeners is a huge fan of that system.
I too am a huge fan. I programmed a BBS on it.
Yeah, that's right. You mentioned that at another one of our shows.
I'm trying to find the copy of that program.
Yeah, you should totally get it working. Connect to the internet.
Mm-hmm. No, just get a modem hooked up to my the Comcast phone I don't use.
Oh my gosh. Ryan's in the chat. He's actually listening. He just popped in, the lurker. British 1500. Welcome to the chat. Yeah, we're talking about you right now. You're you're probably the first person that pops into my head when I hear the TI 99.4A. And then Mark, because of course, BBS. So that's pretty cool. Do you have any questions for him, Ryan, while you're out there? Well, just pass them on right now.
Oh, he does a podcast on it.
We should
get me on that podcast.
All right, we should. Yeah, you want to guess, Ryan? We got this. We'll hook you up.
Okay, so let's move along here. This is my favorite section. This is where we talk about the top 5 songs were going. That were the top 5 songs on March 30th, 1984, and then I will somehow relate them to video or arcade games.
I just got to say, I love the fact that you're able to do this every week. So yeah, get on with your bad self.
Okay, so the number 5 song, Girls Just Want to Have Fun by Cyndi Lauper.
All right.
And while this song was on the... Oh, we going to play some?
Is that good?
Yeah. That's...
So I can't play too much because someone will flag the show.
Right. So while this song was on a Just Dance video game, the very first Just Dance game that was released, it's more interesting that the music video starred wrestler Captain Lou Albano. He played Cyndi Lauper's father. He's the guy with rubber bands in his beard.
Okay.
So he would actually go later on to portray Mario of Donkey Kong himself on the Super Mario Brothers Super Show. Tell me you watched that show.
Was that on Saturday morning Supercade? Because
I don't know.
I kind of vaguely remember that.
My wife, it was her, in the 90s. She's a 90s girl.
Hey, DJ Andriel just joined the chat.
Welcome, DJ Andriel. I hope I said that right.
And Dariel.
Yeah. So Cyndi Lauper also appeared on that show in an episode called Captain Lou is Missing. So it's
sweet.
So that's a crazy cross of, that song.
I love. Yeah, that's
video games.
Awesome. What's next?
Next, number 4, the 4th most popular song, Here Comes the Rain Again by Eurythmics.
Oh, yeah. Such a good intro. Probably one of the best intros in a song ever. I love it.
The thing about that video is that the clouds are all black, and I'm like, what happened? And I didn't know about infrared photography or whatever they did. So Eurythmics, their song "Sweet Dreams Are Made of This" is featured in the film Tron Legacy. It's the second song that's heard after Sam Flynn. He finds the secret passage behind the Tron video game, and right after Journey's Separate Ways finishes.
Oh, yeah.
It's played very quietly because obviously he's gone down into the basement.
I did not know that.
I almost didn't believe it, so I had to go find a clip of the movie, and
I'm gonna have to go watch the movie again. Thanks a lot.
The entire film, just to confirm this part.
Also, I will totally do that. I'm gonna do it after the show tonight.
So the number 3 song on March 30th, 1984 was "Jump" by Van Halen. Nice. So there was a Guitar Hero Van Halen game.
Okay.
That the Guitar Hero series put out. It had 25 songs from the group. It also had 19 songs from other bands around that era. So I guess to round it out, it was released for the PlayStation 2 and 3, Xbox 360, and the Wii systems in December 2009. This thing actually gets criticized because it doesn't contain any Sammy Hagar or Gary Sharon. But I'm like, come on, who cares?
It's, yeah, whatever. Jump is one of the... Okay, so 1984 for me is one of my all-time favorite albums from the 80s. I love that album. Randy, what's your take on Van Halen?
Well, they're awesome, and I prefer Van Halen over Van Hagar.
Yeah.
I mean, just being a little more old school.
Yeah, I totally agree with you. I totally agree with you.
Yeah, I love the music. Awesome.
Cool. So we got.
We didn't ask you about Cyndi Lauper. What are your feelings?
I've never really sat and thought a lot deeply about Cyndi Lauper, so I'm probably not a good one to ask.
I actually attended a concert of hers somewhere in.
She's awesome. She's
somewhere
so
in Pennsylvania.
Awesome.
Yeah, she was super cool, but she was handing out these like bracelets, and then when she went to hand to me, I was in the front row or something. She just limply dropped it and it fell on me.
Oh, no.
And I don't know why. That's what I remember about my interaction with Cyndi Lauper.
I thought the whole rock and wrestling was a great marketing.
Oh yeah. She was totally involved with the wrestling community.
Yeah. Oh yeah, she was in so many storylines. That was crazy.
Oh, and she had all those wrestlers in her videos.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, totally awesome. And
that video was only $35,000, and the reason why it was so cheap, it has all these digital effects. Lorne Michaels, the guy who runs Saturday Night Live, basically had access to all of this expensive digital equipment and lent it to her and whoever was making the video for free.
Wow.
And I think that video actually has some of the first digital effects that were done in a music video.
Sweet.
It's all by memory here. Okay, number 2. I always feel like somebody's watching me. This song is badass.
It is total. I play it every Halloween. It's on my Halloween 80s mix. So tell us about this one. Right.
So Somebody's Watching Me by Rockwell. The interesting thing about this was his debut song, first song he'd ever put out single wise. His childhood friend was Michael Jackson, and he sang backup vocals for him on the album. And as we all know, Michael Jackson would later create the 1990 Sega arcade game Moonwalker.
Yes, which is an awesome game. Well, I liked it anyway.
I mean, I would love to have one, but they seem to be pricey.
Yeah, they are. Well, probably because he's dead, but I think it's an awesome game. It's a little weird. I love the Sega version too. Speaking of Sega Genesis, the Sega Genesis version, even though it sort of goes off in its own direction from the arcade game, it's a really good version of the game. And they also did several versions of Columns, Randy.
Oh, that'd be great
for the Genesis. So don't tell your wife that if you want to upright, but you could you could probably just go buy a Sega console and get Columns 1, 2, and 3 and have a ball.
Yeah, but where would the restoration fund be?
Yeah, exactly.
I mean, that's actually what I'm looking forward to, because that was my love of working at Aladdin's, was digging in and repairing stuff. So.
Oh, that's cool. That's awesome. All right. So what are we up to now?
We're at number 1. The number 1 song on March 30th, 1984 was Footloose by Kenny Loggins.
Oh my gosh. I love that song. That's just you can't, I mean, seriously, really.
Did you ever see Kenny Loggins perform?
No, but I'm actually looking forward to he's touring right now. Yeah. So
let me break some news. He has a lot of songs that are really boring, and he likes to play them first. And then he saves his hits for when you think half the people have left because they're like, oh God, I can't handle it.
But this song is so awesome. Yeah. I got to tell you, my aunt gave me this tape in 1984. And I listened to it endlessly. I have 2 copies of the album. I have the regular album. I have the picture disc. I have the extended CD that they released 10 years ago. I love this movie. It's just awesome. Big fan.
So Kenny Loggins, that song was in a Just Dance Kids 2014 release, which came out for the Wii, the Wii U, the Kinect.
Cool.
It's part of the Just Dance video game franchise, basically. Awesome. Interesting. David Ortega served as executive music producer on that game. Ortega is famous. I think he choreographed Footloose. if I remember correctly.
Wow.
If you ever play the game, it's hilarious because it's for kids, so all of the dance moves are like ridiculously simple. It would make for a good, fun drinking game, I think.
That's awesome. So
okay, I got a couple more little things here.
Yeah, go for it.
At the box office, Police Academy enjoyed its second week as the #1 film
in 1984 on this date.
Correct. And so how does that relate to video games? Well, there's a company called Tengen. They produced NES compatible games, and they had nearly completed programming a Police Academy video game. It was based on the 80s the 80s cartoon series, and it was shelved. They decided, you know what? Let's not do this. Let's make another game that's like basically a ripoff of Super Mario Brothers, and then they shelved that. So somewhere on some hard drive, there's 2 different Police Academy games, and they've never been released. I'm not 100% sure if they're out on MAME somewhere.
Okay, question for the chatters in the audience. Who created Tengen? I'm waiting.
Tengen. Yeah, there's like a little bit of a delay.
Yeah. There's like a 10 to 15 second delay, so yeah, it's do. I think I probably have something like that one in here. Let's see. Oh.
I'm going to bet you're the only one that knows this because I don't.
Oh, here we go. British 1500 has it correct. It was Atari.
Oh.
Atari created Tengen, and it was a splinter company. They did that, key games. They created their own competition. And when they got into the video game market, they did not want to license their games through Nintendo because it cost money. So they created Tengen, and they made their own games. They got sued by Nintendo, by the way. So actually they ended up playing nice, and there was multiple versions of Tengen games that came out in black cartridges that were re-released with the official Nintendo seal, and put out on the Atari. So, on the Nintendo. But Atari was the creator of that company, I believe.
Oh, I only remember them from that other company they made where they had I don't know which cabinets. Bally Sente, the Sente cabinets.
Oh, yeah.
Was it Sente another Atari company spinoff or something?
Sente, yeah, I believe it was. It was Sente, and they had key games. Yeah, it was all...
I totally want one of those cabinets with a big white little cowl thing that hangs over.
I had such a good intro for Dan. I'm going to have to save it for next week, though, I think.
Okay, so our last little thing that happened on March 30th, 1984... it was actually a week ago, but since we didn't have a show, I couldn't bring it up. But March 24th, 1984 is the day the Breakfast Club all had detention together. In the beginning of the movie, that's the date. That's the date.
Okay.
Spoken aloud.
Because it was 85 when that came out.
Correct. But yeah, I guess it's set then.
They must have shot it in 84, right?
Yep. So actor Emilio Estevez, who played the jock, he starred a year earlier in an anthology film called Nightmares. His episode is called The Bishop of Battle, and it concerned a video game addicted teenager who is consumed by his game. Have you ever seen that?
What is it again?
Emilio Estevez is in this. It's like an anthology film. It has like 4 little episodes.
No, I've never seen it.
It's so good, and they totally trash a bunch of classic games during his battle inside of the arcade.
S1500 says, "Mess with the bull, get the horns."
I think that's one of the things that's spoken in there.
Excellent. So,
and that's the end of Back to the Cade.
Oh. It's the Arcade News with Don Reed.
So I guess this leaves me to do Dan Reed's news. So, hey, what do you say we switch off?
Okay, you go first.
Okay. BBC.com in the UK. There's a new £1 coin, and there's a guy that's running this arcade called, I don't even know how to pronounce this, Llandudno. Who would name Llandudno? That sounds like the worst name. Llandudno Amusement Arcade. Adam Williams, who owns Llandudno Pier in Conwy County, had to adapt his 1,000 slot machines to ensure they can accept a new 12-sided coin, which was released on Tuesday. He says, we're lucky as we're a sizable company with in-house engineers. And he said, so we can deal with these kind of problems, even though it will cost us tens of thousands of pounds to accept the new £1 coin. And he says if I was a small business or a single site operator, it would make me go bankrupt. The interesting thing about this is what if they change like the quarter in the US? You know, how would that affect the vending market?
I'm sure there's vending lobbyists that would never let that happen.
Well, and I think that's why the dollar is still around, because literally, you know, the dollar hasn't changed, but all these other bills have new security features, you know, so you can use an old dollar machine. Like I have a, you know, coin machine in my house, and
oh, that's right.
So you can still use the old dollars and they work great, you know, but if you try to, you know, if you want a $5 or $20 bill, you have to update your bill changer all the time. It's expensive. So I can't imagine. They've done this, apparently, like they've made a change in the coin like every 3 to 4 years. So it's just got to wreak havoc on the vending industry, in my opinion.
Insane.
All right, take it, Mark.
Okay. From UPI.com, a man uses a 3D printer to build retro arcade gaming system. Really?
Yeah.
Let's hear about this.
So can you post that link to the chat so these guys can look at it?
I don't think I can post a link. I think only you, as the originator of the stream, can post the link.
Really?
Yeah, it prevents you from doing it if you're just a schmo like me.
You're just a regular Joe schmo? Okay.
Right. So let's talk about this real quick. Tech-minded video game fan in Malaysia shared the process he used to create his own working retro arcade game machine with a 3D printer. Christopher Tan, a nanoblock artist, based in Malaysia, said he bought electronic components, including an LCD display, a Raspberry Pi 3, computer online, before tackling the project of using his 3D printer, which he himself built from a kit, to make a desktop arcade machine. 100 plus hours of 3D printing. He printed the case, the control panel, the paint. I guess he painted it.
Yeah, he painted it, and then he
put custom graphics on it.
Yeah.
Oh, he made a cute little fake coin slot.
I know, it's totally awesome. If you look at the video, it's like the coolest little thing, and it's just Randy, what you're gonna say?
It's really cool. I click the link, and you know, I love the Raspberry Pi. I'm currently now trying to figure out.
I have 3 of them.
One to control a ham radio.
Oh, that's awesome. Are you a ham radio operator?
Well, yeah, of course, I'm a geek.
I love it. Sweet. You learned something new.
To figure out how to use like there was a way to use ham radios to use like modems before. I never really got into that, but it's fascinating.
Yeah, we use it for slow scan TV and everything. It's quite a hobby. So I'm surprised with all of my activity in amateur radio and computers growing up as a kid, how I was ever able to meet a girl and get married.
I've been married twice. I'm working on a third, so you know.
Yeah.
So anyway, Washington Post says the 2017 Video Game Hall of Fame finalists are in, and they're not just arcade classics. After opening in 2015, the Strong Museum's World Video Game of Hall of Fame in Rochester, New York, spent its first 2 years mostly honoring classics such as Pac-Man, Oregon Trail, and Super Mario Brothers. So, but the interesting thing is also inducted were like The Sims, World of Warcraft, Grand Theft Auto 3, and which are very popular in their own right. But now,
biggies.
Yeah, exactly. So now the museum is wading deeper into the gaming world, and this is really interesting. Nominees include the groundbreaking.
Are you baking some brownies, maybe?
The groundbreaking puzzle game Myst. I mean, you gotta respect that, right? That's pretty awesome. Halo, Combat Evolved, and the critically acclaimed Portal. I love Portal. I gotta say, Portal 2 is like so cool. I love Portal 2 way more than Portal 1. Both are really great in their own right, though. Nintendo groundbreaking 1981 classic Donkey Kong is on the list this time. It's like, how did they miss that the first time around? Shouldn't have just been like one of the first ones that was inducted? I don't know. And so is Mortal Kombat, which was released in 92. Probably towards the end of your run, Randy, in the Aladdin's world. And also among 2017 finalists is Pokemon Red and Green, released in 1996 Nintendo Game Boy. I know that sounds ridiculous, but I know people that have that game and they're obsessed about it. They loved it. And it was sort of like the I don't know, I would say it was like the golden age of Pokemon, the most unusual pick Among this year's nominees is Microsoft Windows Solitaire, released on Windows 3.0, equipped PCs in 91. It's a little more than a computerized version of centuries-old car game, but it lacks many of the traits that are that made others on the list so innovative. But as the Hall of Fame noted, it's been installed on more than 1 billion machines since it came out. So it's really interesting that analog games can, be that popular. I mean, everyone knows, like, think of Dwight from The Office, playing computer solitaire. Was that him? Doesn't he have that? Or was that a different guy?
That sounds right.
So, anyway. So other titles in the 2017 list are role-playing games, Final Fantasy VII, which you hear a lot about. Survival horror. In fact, I have a copy of that for the Sony PlayStation. Survival horror game, Resident Evil, which is bloody scary. When I remember playing that as a 20-something in my house.
A 20-something child.
With all the lights turned down and my Sony PlayStation hooked up to the big stereo on this giant TV. And it would literally give me anxiety. I had to quit playing it. Street Fighter 2, Tomb Raider, and Wii Sports, which is honestly the best thing to ever come out for the Wii, in my opinion. So who doesn't love to bowl, right? Just awesome. Oh, yeah. So that's sort of the news in a nutshell. Do you guys have any comments on those picks? What do you think, they're unusual, or
are they going to have anything left next year? I mean, that's like the pretty popular stuff.
Computer solitaire.
Solitaire. I mean, I know I played it. That was my second favorite game next to Character Map.
I had when I was really big into Quake 2 and Unreal Tournament.
Oh, I loved Quake 2.
We had a clan, and it's called Clan Panic. If you go to the website's still there, clanpanic.com, and I think on the main page it says that we're good at all, we play all these games, and it says we kick ass at Microsoft Hearts. Because it was like one of the first network games to demonstrate, network capability of video games on the Windows platform. So I just remember thinking
Did you play the Quake 2 Chaos maps?
Oh, I had every mod you could have for that.
That's my favorite.
Devastator was my favorite. You had 2 mechs. You pick up 2 runes. One rune would turn you to a mech with dual chain guns. The other one would turn you into a mech with 2 rockets. And everybody else in the level would have to try to shoot you, and they were grunts. And you were just given like these little pea shooters. So you would basically run away from these mechs that would try to kill you. So fun.
I guess my other thing was the rail room, which was like a circular room with just rail guns.
Yeah. Did you ever play a mod called Capture the Chicken?
Sounds familiar.
There's a rubber chicken in the map, and you'd have to run around and you pick up the chicken, and then if you hit the trigger button, so it was like, I'm going to say something totally not PC here, but what do they call Smear the Queer now?
It must be a Midwest thing. I have no idea.
You throw a football up in the air, somebody catches it, everybody tries to tackle you. We called it Smear the Queer back in the day.
I don't even think they allow kids to do that anymore.
No, and you're not allowed to go outside. I think you're pretty much...
No. Yeah, that would require them to actually have physical contact and play, and we will not allow that in our society anymore.
But Quake 2 had a mod, and it was called Capture the Chicken, and if you picked up the chicken, you were it, and it would drop these golden feathers, and you would try to run away, and you would glow. So if you tried to hide, you'd have this glow effect. And the funny thing was, if you hit your trigger button, it would choke the chicken. Then it would go... And you could just hide somewhere in the map and go, and then people would hear you and come after you. And the longer you held the chicken, the more points you got. So it was actually a super fun mod. And then there was Reckoning, Devastator I mentioned, LMCTF, which was a Capture the Flag mod, which was amazing. There was an Abandon mod where you could pick up and be invisible, or all these different runes. I loved Quake 2. Quake 2 was my game. That was my jam.
All right, I sense that there's going to be an Arcade Radio Quake 2 live stream going to happen sometime.
I totally diverged. I apologize. That's how I was going. We should probably move on to our guest. What do you think?
Is there any voicemail?
Oh, let me check. As a matter of fact, there is. Oh, hey, let's check this out.
Why not?
Okay. All right. So, and the thing, and then put that there.
Hello, Arcade Ratio podcast people. This is Bob Zarzadeck,
Oh,
your
Bob.
buddy. Hey, Dan, Mark, and Adam. You are men of men. Now, where was I after complimenting you? Oh yeah, your host, Aladdin. Aladdin, if you have a minute, can you get that lamp and rub it a little for me? Because I have some taxes coming up that I need attending to. And I'm not really in the mood to sell my pristine white Nike sneaker collection on eBay. Could barely even say it out loud. Oh, anyway, I was wondering, Aladdin, if there were any lady Aladdins out there. I mean, it's not just you, right? I mean, there's got to be like a chick Aladdin or something, right? To make it interesting. If not, well, then, that's too bad. I feel for you, man. I truly do. Anyway, guys, no more Aladdin chick talk. I can see from my watch that I need to get off the phone, get ready for my middle of the night lawn mowing. The best time to mow your lawn is under the moonlight. Anyway, you guys take care. Zarzadeck out.
That guy's weird.
Do you have any female advice for Bob, Randy?
No. It sounds like he has some deep problems.
Some deep-rooted issues.
Yeah.
Wow.
I don't know. Maybe we should just move on.
Be our guest. Be our guest. Put our service to the test.
And that is the cue for our guest, Mr. Randy Donahue. Welcome again to the Arcade Radio Show podcast.
Hello. Great to be here.
We're so excited to have you on the show. I just think it's great you have such a different perspective. And Aladdin's Castle, for me, is one of my favorite arcades of all time. So tonight I'm hoping you're going to wreck that whole image for me.
Well, I will do my best.
Okay.
I will give you a behind-the-curtain look.
Oh, yes.
At what happened during the good, the bad, and the ugly.
All right. Well, and to our chatters in the audience tonight, please make sure that you're firing away questions if you have them. If you're an Aladdin's Castle fan or if you're a Bally's fan, we're going to have a little history going on here. So give us a little bit of your background, Randy.
Well, let's see. I started with Bally back in...
Whoa. Let's back up to the way back. Way back. Yeah, so tell us a little bit about your becoming a nerd, as you mentioned.
Well, I grew up in small town Minnesota, and that back before the days where I could occupy myself with my smartphone and tablets and all of this other stuff that our children today take for granted. And back then, growing up in a small town, there was nothing to do, and you really had to use your imagination a lot. And I spent a lot of time reading magazines, looking
what kind of
for
magazines?
Well, just anything that would prove to me that there was life someplace else, I think, really. But a lot of electronics and computer kind of hobby stuff. And so I remember bugging my parents to help me, get some extra money and start buying, electronics components to build stuff.
Sure.
And one of the first things I can remember back in the day, of course, being a new ham, there was a company called Heathkit.
Oh yeah, the Heathkit.
You used to be able to build a lot of gizmos for amateur radio, and then somehow I got segued into computers, and I built an Altair.
An Altair, what was it called? The Altair.
Was it the Altair 8000?
Yeah,
or something like that.
Yeah, that's the one that Bill Gates and what's his head, Steve Ballmer brought code down because they didn't have an operating system for it, right? So they were trying to sell them an operating system.
Mm-hmm. And so that's kind of what got me into computers and stuff. And then of course I, Radio Shack, it was in a town near me, so that was kind of another store to hang out with. That was back when they used to hire people that knew about electronics and just not how to sign you up for a cell phone plan.
Oh,
and
And speaking of which, my Radio Shack is closing here in Golden Valley.
Yeah, they're all. We've lost all of ours around here, and which is sad. Being a ham guy, that's great to have a place like that local to buy little pieces and parts. But
can I interject a question really quick? When they were open, and this is my frustration with Radio Shack up until the point of its death. For the last 5 years as a collector, 10 years as a collector, Radio Shack, you think that they would have the capacitors, the lamps, the things you need when you go there. And they have a little section. And 9 times out of 10, I would go there. They did not have what I want. And back in the day, they had everything that you wanted.
Yes. Yeah. And now everything has went online, that the Amazons or for us electronics people, the DigiKeys of the world have pretty much ruined brick and mortar stores.
Yeah.
And
Fry's
what
Electronics.
frustrated me was I'd go into Radio Shack and some of their salespeople would come up to help me, and they were obviously, fresh out of high school. And they would look at me and say, "Well, can I help you?" And my response was probably not. Because I'm going to go to this bin with all the parts, and then they would leave me alone because they knew that I was in a different world. But it was sad that they didn't have more of those switches and lights and things they used to carry. So, but that's the nature of how things evolve in our economy, I guess.
Right. So then, your geekdom went on from building, and Heath kits and computers to,
yeah, just like to experiment. And at one time, there was an opportunity that in our local mall in Worthington, Minnesota, the Northland Mall, which, again, as things evolve, the entire mall is no longer there.
What's there now?
A large parking lot and a car dealership.
Do you drive by it and you're just like, God dang it?
Yeah, well, actually, it looks better that way than it did because it had gotten to a point to where there was only like 4 or 5 stores left in this mall that in its big day, I think, had 30 stores. And the guy that owned the mall couldn't afford to pay the electric bill. So you would walk into the mall and the only lights in the mall would be what was coming out of the stores.
Oh, that's terrible.
Yeah, so you'd have this kind of eerie, like Halloween night shopping experience,
Oh, wow.
And and kind of dangerous because you'd go to the mall and of course, there's no parking lot lights.
Right.
So, so it definitely needed to go, but it was sad to see it deteriorate over the years because I remember that was in my late 70s, high school days, that was our go-to cruising place, where you would drive through the parking lot and waste your parents' gas. And, and that's where the hangout was because that's what you did in small towns. So, and it used to be full of stores, you could get anything and everything there. And that's where I started my arcade days. Bally's had another division other than Aladdin's Castle. It was called Bally's LeMan's Family Fun Center.
Oh yeah, LeMan's had the same tokens as Aladdin's. They were the same weird, odd shape.
Yep. Yeah, you'll just see that they've got just a little different press design on them, but they're the same size, same configuration. And in their heyday, there was 55 LeMan's Family Fun Center stores that were owned by Bally's, and they operated independently in the very early 80s. And then about 84, about a year after I had gotten there, I started there as an attendant. And I think it was in early 84, Bally's decided to merge that company because they had a separate home office, everything. They merged them into the Bally's Aladdin's Castle, Franklin Park, Illinois office. Okay. And so everything went then through one corporate office, and we just became another division or another name.
So I think like sometime in the mid 90s, Bally actually got bought out by Williams, but for your run, they were Bally, and they owned everything really.
Yeah. For my run, they were Bally, and then I was basically with them right up until I think they might have sold or got acquired by Namco. And that was in '93. I remember that Aladdin sold to Namco, and then we're starting to convert, their locations into what called Namco Cybertainment division. But yes, I mean, in the heyday, once Aladdin's merged all these locations, there was about 450 Aladdin's or Bally owned entities, and that included, the 55 LeMan stores. So that's where I started.
Yeah. So you work for LeMan, you start for LeMan's, really.
Yeah.
And then so essentially that was the same as Aladdin's and Bally Entertainment. So can you tell us about give us the story about how you got your first job there? What was that like?
Well, it was kind of funny because they opened this new store, and they brought in a manager from I think he came from a store they had in Dillon, Colorado, and his wife was originally from Minnesota. So when the new store opened, he had the opportunity to move out. So there was an arcade in the mall where Bally's, put this LeMan's, but their lease was coming to an end, and it was a small mom and pop store, real tiny spot. And Bally's come in and said, well, we'll rent 5,000 square feet. And of course, the mom and pop shop, was like, well, we can't compete with that, so we're going to close. So one of the attendants that got hired there was a gentleman that worked in that location, and then they hired another older gentleman. So it was basically the manager and a couple of attendants. Well, the older gentleman they hired lasted about 2 weeks, and basically went to the manager and said, these kids are driving me insane. So he couldn't do the job, and it just coincided with the day that I walked in there and was talking with my friend that had worked at this other arcade, and Dan was his name. And he went to the manager and he said, hey, this guy would be good. And that's literally how I got started. And then I was working later that night. So that's how I got started as a part-time attendant.
They didn't do a background check or?
No. So I could have just gotten, released from a
prison,
right, for, pedophilia or something. But
wayward boys.
Yeah, so no, and that was.
I don't think that you were old enough to be a pedophile, though, right? I mean,
no, yeah. So
it doesn't work that way.
No, so yeah. So there was very little.
I'm a little worried about the direction this interview is taking.
Yeah, so there was little to no background in the early days of employment. So that's how I got started, and it was a great job. I loved the LeMan's way of doing business. I think really better than what Aladdin's had. It was their locations. If anybody, if you had the opportunity to do it, they were just bright and very inviting, bright colors and stuff. And the Aladdin's early on were darker, and they did lighten up after they acquired the LeMan's way of doing business, and they did take a lot of their ideas.
That's awesome. I'm trying to pull up a picture of a Bally LeMan's.
Yeah, so they're hard to find online.
They are. I actually have some tokens from LeMan's, and I have a crap ton of Aladdin's tokens.
There was a guy online trying to sell some tokens. This was a number of years ago, and I think he had them on eBay. They were LeMan's, ones, and he must have somehow found them in an area of the country where LeMan's wasn't at. So you had these things advertised, as rare, collectible,
Oh, sure.
And I told him, I said, well, that's great. I said, I got a bag of 5,000 of them I could ship to you, if they're really rare. But yeah, they were a good division, well-run division. So
was it required for them to have an Atari LeMan's game in there or not?
No.
That's a shame.
No. No.
I just bought one, so I'm like, oh, maybe it was in one, but no.
So what made you want to work for Bally? Were you like a gamer, or did you have an Atari as a kid? What was?
Well, I did have a game system at home. I had the Atari 2600, but I had the Sears Roebuck version.
Oh yeah.
And yeah, so that's what I had. So I used to engross myself in playing Pong. So that's what we had. I had the little square that just moved back and forth on the TV.
Sears had the illustrious burl wood finish on the front.
Yep.
Mm-hmm. And it had and they called it the Video Arcade, but it was licensed from Atari, so it was totally legit.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it was
Telegames. That was their deal, right?
Yeah. I believe it was. And I remember growing up, my parents bought this, and my dad, when we hooked it up to the TV, he just sat and watched this thing, and he's like, "You got to be kidding! This is all it does," So, and yeah, so he didn't quite get the whole concept at all. So
the allure.
But yeah, as far as what really interests me in working for Bally's, I think the biggest thing that interests me initially is that I was unemployed, and
Yeah,
that was
I need a job.
That was probably the biggest draw immediately. And I got to thinking, it's like, well, I could either work at the arcade, or I could go down the road and get a job working in a meatpacking plant.
Uh-huh.
So I thought, the arcade sounds like it's going to be cleaner and more fun. So, and it was, and it was the heyday of arcade time in the city of Worthington, because it was so busy in there. We were in small town Worthington, Minnesota. We're making $5,000 and $6,000 a week deposits, and at a quarter time, that's a lot of activity. And LeMan's in their stores, because they were so busy, had a slogan that they beat into their attendants for handling the crowds that would come in. And it was, if you're not playing, you're not staying.
That's kind of, they all had some sign like that, right?
Yeah, because it's just, we just didn't have the room for people to stand around. The ones that were standing were literally in line to play a game.
Putting their quarter up on the marquee or on the glass.
because it was just that busy.
Yeah.
And
I love that. That's something we've never talked about, but that is there's nothing like that. One of the reasons we all love arcades, and we try to duplicate some of this, in our basements and whatnot, so we can have people over, and it's a social thing, right? Arcades were social.
Yep.
And the other part of it is there was a code that you just knew as an arcade goer. If you put your quarter up there, everybody knew you were up for the game,
Yep.
And and then later on, if you put your quarter up, it was to fight somebody. But
well, yeah.
But
it's funny because we didn't have, of course, in Worthington, Minnesota, we didn't have any like gang elements that we had to worry about, as opposed to some of the stores that I went into managing or dealing with later outside of Minnesota.
Yeah. So
but,
tell us a little bit about, like, before we get into your management and stuff. Tell us a little bit about what types of things maybe kids would try to get away with.
Oh, what they try to get away with. Well, kids being kids try to get away with everything. But the biggest thing was always probably angling you somehow to get a free game. It took my coin. It took and
you could tell if it took the coin, right?
Yeah, a lot of times, because generally if it took the coin is jammed somewhere in the coin mech, because very seldom are you going to get a well-maintained game you're going to be able to drop a coin and it's going to go all the way through the coin mechanism and not trip that switch enough. And occasionally we'd find a bad coin switch, and so then it was easy to say, okay, yeah, the kid's telling me the truth. But I had kids that we put games in kind of these octagon configurations around some of these power poles in the center of the arcades, and you would get kids that would they'd watch for the attendant in groups, and one of them would sneak behind the machine and actually take like a screwdriver or something and pop the back door off to be able to reach in to try to flick free coins on.
Oh my God.
And,
I heard about the old trick of dropping a coin in on a string and all that kind of stuff, and the cutter mechs came along and fixed all that, right?
Yeah, we put the cutters went in and pretty much took care of that. The biggest one that comes to mind was what happened out in California when I was out there. Kids were taking rocks and they would smash pennies to get them to be about the same size as a token. And when I originally took over this one store, it was a huge problem. When they were doing their collections once a week out of the games, they were actually collecting more smashed pennies than they were tokens.
Okay, I have a question. I don't know if you know the answer, but in my arcade at home, I have 0.900. Chuck E. Cheese used 0.984. And those are 0.984. I forget what the measurement is. Millimeters of an inch. which
Okay.
doesn't really make sense because it's millimeters, right? So it's some sort of measurement of the inch, right? 0.984 is larger than a quarter, or some coin slots actually wouldn't even take the 0.984s because they were too large. But anyway, the 0.900s and the Bally's were slightly, or the Aladdins, I should say, the Aladdins and LeMan's tokens were slightly smaller than the 900. So they like a 0.894 or something.
Yeah, and we actually had inside that coin mechanism, there's a cradle in there that when that coin hits it,
Yep.
and that cradle is weighted, it will drop the coin either into the reject side or it'll drop it in the accepted side, and it's based on weight and how it hits the cradle. And we used to play with that weight that's on there, and we would either super glue additional weight to it to help compensate, to help get rid of some of these other coins, because what the kids would do is they'd take a penny and then when they'd smash it to get about the same diameter, and then they'd spin it on the coin slot so it would hit that cradle harder and get it to trip. So so they were always looking for some angle to do that, and we took care of it in the California store, and got rid of that, and so that got handled properly, and the word got out, in the way we handled it, so it didn't happen again.
So whipping or beating? What was
we caught a kid doing it, and
Oh,
so it
no.
was like, okay, so I'm going to have you thrown out of the store. In California, we would, the local police would come and actually write them a kind of a citation that basically says, you've been officially warned by law enforcement that you are not welcome in this establishment, and if you come back, you go to jail. And this kid who was 18 got in this local policeman's face and started just giving him the riot act about how he knew everything, and the policeman looked at me. He said, "Let me make a phone call," he said, "because I really want somebody else to deal with this." And he called a gentleman that he had worked with, because being in California, gentleman showed up, and he was with a branch of our federal government that deals with counterfeiting and destroying government money. And this individual went someplace, but I never seen him again. But so anyway, the word got out. You don't do that there. So, but yeah, it was a completely different environment when you start traveling around the country. But,
Speaking of traveling around the company, tell us how you got into management.
Well, when Aladdin's Castle took over the LeMan's division, their area manager, who was a gentleman by the name of Charlie Bork out of Des Moines, Iowa, came up to visit the store, introduce himself and such, and he came in, and first thing he did is him and my manager went around and on paper drew out how to reorganize all the games in the store. And he's like, "This is the way I want it done, because this is the Aladdin's Castle flow," or whatever it was. And so after they did that, Charlie and my manager at the time, a gentleman by the name of Nelson Bonilla, they went to go have lunch and discuss, what's going on in the arcades and stuff. So I thought, well, while they're gone, it was slow. So I got out the two-wheel cart and I moved all these games around the way this drawing was. And Charlie came back, and Nelson looked at him and he said, "I told you that he would do this while we were gone." And luckily, I guess I did that and impressed him. So that put me on a list, of, hey, do you want to be a manager? And so from there, they sent me to my first store as a manager was in Columbus, Ohio. And it was for one of their strip mall locations that belonged, the original franchise was called Funway Freeway. And so it was a store that had black carpet on the walls and great big highway signs, stop and yield and one way. And so I managed that for a little while, and then transferred back to a store, actually another Bally's LeMan store in Spencer, Iowa.
Hey, I have a quick question. Since you didn't live there, did they put you up in a hotel or?
Well, I actually did live in Ohio for a while, and then they started while I was in Ohio. Aladdin said, "Well, what we're going to do now, because there's also an Aladdin's Castle inside the mall. So you had this strip mall out in the parking lot, which had a video game arcade, and then there was another.
You're going to live inside of it. No.
Well, no, they said we're going to come up with this new concept called multi-store managers.
Okay.
And since the guy in the mall has been here a lot longer than you, he's going to take this one, and we're going to transfer you to another store. Where do you want to go? And I'm like, well, let's go back towards where I grew up. So they sent me to Spencer, Iowa. Was there for a little while managing that store, and then when that store lease ran out, they decided to close it. They came to me and they said, would you be interested in being a roving manager? And I'm like, okay, that sounds just fantastic. What the heck is a roving manager? And they're like, well, it's a position in the company that we send you to a store and you evaluate why the store is not making enough money, or we send you to a location where we're opening a new store and you help set up, the new store. You can go to a temporary location, like went down to New Orleans for Mardi Gras.
Yeah.
1 year because they thought, hey, we're going to set up an arcade just over Mardi Gras. And you know what we found out doing that? A lot of people go to Mardi Gras to party and drink. They don't go there to play video games. So we lost a ton of money on that. Yeah. So, but that's kind of what we did. We were the company's problem solvers. Occasionally we would cover, store managers' vacations, but very seldom. And that was that was the height of my management. And I did that for quite a while. Then come off the road, went back to managing a store. And then when that store closed, they offered me a area manager's position in New York, the state of New York. And I decided at that time, I kind of had started to see the decline and thought it was time to step out.
Hey, so during these different stores that you're at, was there anything that the employees did, like after hours, or anything fun, or things that they got away with while they were in the arcade?
Yeah, because it's a fun environment, and what I loved about being a roving manager, which led me perfectly into my secondary career of working in law enforcement for a number of years. We would come into a store and not identify ourselves as a corporate employee. We would come in and we would play games and we would just observe what's going on and maybe get an idea mentally of things that could be changed to make more money. And so I would observe a tenant's behavior. And I remember coming into one store and there was like a line of gentlemen that were by the office, and every now and again the door would open and somebody would come out and another one would go in. And I'm like, well, this is strange, So I watched this for a while and I thought, well, maybe the best thing for me to do to figure out what's going on is get in line. And so I'm like, somebody came out, so I go in and here we have a female attendant, employee, that is supplementing her income, I guess would be probably the best way to say it.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah. So I thought, well, okay, now it's like, okay, well, how do I handle this one? Because, first I'm thinking, I waited in line.
Yeah.
But then I thought, well, no, that probably wouldn't be appropriate. So I thought, well, obviously, I get out my business card and show her, that, I'm with, show her corporate ID. And I'm like, you know what this means. And she's like, well, I'll do anything. I'm like, well, that's fine. But no, it's, you need to be done. And so, so she left. And what was funny
how
about
difficult was that as a manager?
And what gets even stranger is about a half an hour, 45 minutes after, I terminated her and said, you got to leave. The police officer walks in because, then, with her being gone, I'd put on the vest and everything, and I'm playing attendant until I could call and get a store manager in. And the policeman walks in and goes, well, does this so-and-so work here? And I'm like, well, why do you ask? Well, we just caught her in the parking lot in the car with, some men.
Some men.
Yeah. And you know what? It was beautiful for me to say, nope, she doesn't work here. Doesn't work here at all. So, so we had that go on. I had a store or a area manager one time when I had to come into a store for a while. They were going to be hiring a new manager, and as a roving manager, we were there for supervisory type duties, and generally, if we would also come into a store if a manager was new and didn't know a lot about video game repair, we'd come in and help train him. As a rover, we covered vacations at the corporate office in the technical department that took the telephone calls from managers on how to fix games. So we didn't do a lot of the, extra duties, but there was this area manager. He was adamant about needing this office painted at our Brookfield Mall location in Wisconsin.
Interesting connection. We 2 episodes ago, we had Dan Lucen, who is the founder of Midwest Gaming Classic, which actually has its location in Brookfield, Wisconsin at this Sheraton Hotel right off 35 there. Or not 35, cool. 94.
Yeah, because I was at, and I can't remember the name of the mall, but it was a Brookfield, Wisconsin.
I bet it's the same mall. It's right next door. There's a Sears in there.
It could very well be. But this area manager was adamant. He's like, you're here, you're going to do what I tell you to do. And, I'm talking to corporate, and corporate's like, just make the guy happy and, do what he wants. So I'm like, okay. So I go to the local Menards or Home Depot, whatever it was. And I found a bin full of these gallons of paint that are like close out, or somebody didn't want them or whatever. So I bought 2 or 3 gallons of fluorescent red paint, and I painted this small office. And it was kind of freaky because when you'd walk in and you'd turn the light on, because the office in an arcade was very small, maybe 5 or 6 by 8 feet. I mean, it was tiny, and
a desk and some chairs.
Yeah, maybe just a countertop and a chair, and then maybe another room, so you'd have a one stall kind of restroom. And so you'd walk into this office, and they had no windows on them, and you'd flip on the lights, and it would just terrify you because you would just be sucked into this bright red. And it was amazing because after that, in the rest of my time on the road, nobody ever asked me to paint anything in their stores ever again. So I think it worked.
So we have a couple of questions in the chat, and I want to,
Great.
And one of them is related to, we had a little conversation before the show.
I hope it's not the gal that I fired.
There was one question about that. We'll skip that for now.
Okay. Wouldn't that be embarrassing?
Do you remember her name? Don't say it. Don't say it.
No, I don't. But what's funny is that, and my wife, gets to me about this all the time. I probably have it in a manual someplace because I have documents and manuals and all of these things from where I, had been on the road and my times about, and I just keep moving them.
Oh my gosh!
Every place we've moved, and for some reason, it's like, when something is, that much of a part of your life. It's like you can't really get rid of it.
No.
Because a lot of the stuff I've saved, maybe some of the, especially from the LeMan's days, store operations manuals and stuff, probably don't exist anymore.
Absolutely.
I keep telling myself, one of these days, I'm going to sit down and scan this data.
Oh, that'd be so awesome. You should totally do that. If you do that, I want to be one of the first guys you email.
Okay.
So we talked a little bit about when I was a kid, in like 86, Afterburner was released in its environment cabinet. I remember going there. My mom dropped me off at the mall because that's the age I was. Yep. And I would just happen to be there the day that this thing was released. And here stood an environment cabinet for Afterburner. And there was a line out the door. And half of them were servicemen. They were in the Air Force, and they were waiting to play the game. And so I waited patiently, and then I got up there, and it was $1 to play it that day. Mm-hmm. And they eventually lowered it to 75 cents, and I think at the time, most games were around a quarter to 50 cents, so it was still pretty expensive for games. So anyway, I played the game, loved it. What a fun game. What was your experience with, like new games and stuff that were coming in at the time, and what was your opinion? And this is a 2-part because someone in the chat was saying, how did you feel about these games that were coming in?
Well, it's interesting because I think you and I probably spoke to it earlier. In all of the years I worked for Bally's, I never played an arcade video game.
That's
I mean,
crazy.
start to finish, because I would repair them, and my job was to make sure that the buttons and the switches and they did everything that they were supposed to do. And then I would usually grab some kid and say, "Finish this game, and then just tell me if it doesn't work right." So then they would play it and go, "Yeah, it works fine." It's like, okay, well then I did my job, because and because I was in when it was so busy, I didn't have time to play a game, and you were technically prohibited from playing games while you were working.
That's I suppose so.
Yeah, and and
now,
of course,
now you're starting to look really familiar. Like I may have tried to swindle you of a token or two.
Yeah, well, I don't know. It's the so as far as the games that were coming in that I remember being in the business, of course, one of the big ones that came out obviously was Dragon's Lair.
Oh yeah. Did you have? Did they put the? So did they ship that in with the TV on top so the kids could watch?
No, that was it came in two different units, and we had to assemble it.
Okay.
When it got there, but that was a biggie. Another big one that I remember that we made a killing on was a game called Gauntlet.
Oh yeah, Gauntlet was huge.
Yeah, that was a huge game. Of course, when Mortal Kombat came out, that was another big one. There were some games that Bally's came out and that we were involved, because I'd be working a lot in the Chicago area, and Aladdin's corporate office was in Franklin Park, Illinois, a suburb of Chicago. And so as they would develop a new, what we called a test game, generally they would move those out in the field, and it would just be a one-off game. They would put it in a cabinet. The marquee at the top would be something that somebody drew on paper and crayon.
So these are like prototypes.
Yeah, prototype games. And I remember one of the presidents at the time with Aladdin's Castle was a gentleman by the name of Maury Furchin, and a great guy. And he had a game that he was really excited about. It was called Max RPM, and they brought that out to one of the stores. And then Maury came out later that same day, because he wanted to see, physically what the buzz was around the game. And that was a game that eventually did go into production. But there were other games that were brought in either by Bally's or Williams or some of the other companies. They would bring them in as demo or test games that would never make production. One that I remember that was at one of our stores in Chicago was a game called Penguin Wars, and it was a tabletop tennis looking game, and the game was two penguins, and the penguins would bat the ball with their wings or flippers.
That's so cool.
Yeah, I mean, just
totally absurd.
I wish. I mean, it was one of those games. It was absolutely so stupid that wouldn't make any money. The only time it did make money at this store was that store was so busy, and it was an arcade. It was at Harlem and Irving Mall in Chicago, and the store manager at the time, a gentleman by the name of Michael Caldwell, who was later an area manager that I worked with on several occasions. He ran that store for a long time, and they tested. That was their main test store. So if there was a new game coming out, generally it was going to be in that store, and it was just such a stupid game. The only time it made money is that where kids were standing around waiting to play other games, that somebody'd throw some money in it. But today, because it was a one-off game, kind of wish I had that one in a collection. So
yeah, that's awesome. So
yeah,
you actually, that's really, I never knew that like the employees got to have these sort of special events where they get to see these new games come in, and it probably wasn't an event, right? They just brought it in and like, what do you think of this?
Yeah. No, the truck would bring it in. You get a call at the store saying, hey, there's a truck on a semi and we're going to deliver it. And, for us, it was just another game. I mean, it would get delivered. We'd go through the prep that we're supposed to do on, getting it set up, make sure everything's adjusted right, plug it in. And then the only thing that was different is in the Harlem and Irving location, because they tested a lot of prototype games. They had to keep a lot more detailed records and do collection on games either daily, sometimes, a couple of times a day, because they really wanted to track how that game was doing on revenue quickly, because in the gaming industry, much like some other, the other fast-paced stuff in the computer world, if a game was hitting, they wanted to be able to deploy it into production as quick as possible. So,
Yeah.
So that was, and the other nice thing about being in that kind of an environment, we got to meet a lot of the people from, the different companies that would come in to see how their game is doing.
So,
the people from Williams and Gottlieb and, different companies. So,
yeah, that's really awesome. So, going back to your managerial duties for a second. So, roving manager, is that like a area or like a regional manager? And then how many stores did you end up, traveling to and from?
Yeah, well, I was, pretty much coast to coast. And the way it worked out is that, and the way the roving managers work, we were kind of separate entity from the other management structure, because you'd have store managers that were overseen by area managers that were overseen by regional managers, and then that were overseen by vice presidents. The roving managers were kind of a separate arm, and there was a gentleman by the name of, I believe it was Henry Dorman, and he would be the guy that would give us our assignments, and we would call in on a Thursday afternoon, and he would tell us after doing our weekly collection Friday morning where we were going to drive to next over the weekend. So generally we'd have the rest of Friday and then the weekend to get to wherever we were going to go. And I remember one instance, you never know what's going to happen. So I was at a store in, I believe it was Superior, Wisconsin, and there was an arcade there, and I worked that arcade while they were trying to hire a new store manager or whatever it was. And I call in Thursday and they're like, well, your next store, you need to go to Biloxi, Mississippi. So it's like, okay, so you hop in the car and you go to Biloxi, Mississippi. I get to the store Monday morning and walk in, and you got to remember, these are during times prior to everybody carrying a cell phone. So I go to the store on a Monday morning, and
we had pagers.
And the area manager's like, company's been trying to get a hold of you. They've got a disaster. They need you someplace else. I'm going to cover this. And I'm like, okay. So I call Henry, and I'm like, what's going on? And he's like, you are absolutely going to hate me. And I'm like, well, what's going on? He goes, we had a store manager walked out, left his keys on the counter, and we need you to get, to the store, as quick as you can get there. I'm like, okay. So I'm writing down. I said, where's the store at? He said, it's in Duluth, Minnesota. I said, you mean right across the river from Superior, Wisconsin? He's like, yep, that'd be the one. I'm like, okay. So I hopped back in my car and left and went from Biloxi back to, 30 miles from where I was at when I started the equation. But so we traveled a lot, and it was a good position to have. Got to see.
Was that and sorry, you mentioned that you stayed in Ohio for a while, but were they putting you up in hotels at this point? Like, what did you do for these short-term stays?
Yeah, when all the rovers stayed in hotels, and we worked. Trying to remember our schedule. I think we worked. It was 8 weeks on, 2 weeks off, and because we would work. I mean, our work weeks were 60, 80, 100-hour work weeks, and so the company would just they would put us up, wherever we go. An interesting incident with that. Not knowing a lot of the areas that I initially went to, I got assigned to work in a store in Waukegan, Illinois, and never knew, what was in Waukegan. So generally, I'd drive into the area, and once I found the store, then I would find whatever hotel is close and, pick a reasonably priced hotel. What I found out is that happens in Waukegan on the weekend is that's right near naval base where the kids go to school and get trained, and then I guess they graduate on the weekends. So the parents are there, and there's no hotels to be had. So I wound up, trying to call. I get this chain of command call sheet and couldn't get a hold of anybody, and wound up calling Maury Furchin at home, who was the president at the time. And I'm like, explaining to him what happened. I'm like, I found a hotel, but it's at the Sheraton, and it's $1,400 a night.
Hey.
Whoa.
And
that's
like,
a lot of money. Even that's like 8 times what you pay for a hotel room today.
Huge money. And I'm like, so I'm like, I can't stay there, but I don't know, what you want me to do. And then he says, listen, he said, this is of course probably when Bally's making a lot of money. He's like, none of my people sleep in dives. He's like, this was I think Friday night. He said, you get a room there for Friday and Saturday night, and then Sunday he said everybody will clear out and you can get a cheaper room. So I did. So I stayed there 2 nights, like $2,800, and then was able, after checked out of there, moved into a Super 8 or whatever down the street for like $50. And so then as a rover, every week we had to do an expense report, and then that got sent into the company. And a wonderful lady that we used to deal with back in the day, her name was Sonia Johnson. She really ran the company.
She sounds hot.
Yeah, well, I don't know, but I don't know about that. But let me just tell you that the day that she called me to discuss that expense report, she was hot. She
a different kind of hot.
Yeah, I knew the tone when she gets me on the phone, and it starts with Mr. Donahue.
No.
She's like, I just got this expense report, and I'm like, yeah. And she's like, well, we can't pay this. I said, well, you better check with Maury, the president, because he authorized it. And and then she called me back a few minutes later, and she's like, yeah, it's paid. So,
funny.
Yeah, so they would then, as a rover, you charged everything.
Yeah.
And then the company would reimburse you. And but it was a great job. It was a great time to be in the business. It was a growth industry really for me through a lot of the time that I was there. Of course, in the 80s, well, probably I think Bally's or Aladdin's probably biggest years were around 86, 87. And after that is when you started to see the decline.
It's interesting because there's
in the industry.
There's the first video game crash, and then Bally, in order to recover, it looks like they bought a bunch of stuff. And I think actually that plays into a question from our one of our listeners, right, Mark?
It does. That question is, I'm looking at a Valerian commercial. Sorry.
Oh, that looks so awesome. I want to see it. Tangent. Nope. Go back to the question.
I can't find my current.
So YouTube question from DG.
Oh, yes.
DJ and Ariel.
Yeah, DJ and Ariel. So he was asking that they closed stores in 84, 85, 86, but 86 is actually reported to be the most profitable year for Aladdin's. And he's wondering if you knew what helped profitability, even though locations were closed. Was it like game placement or reducing costs?
Well, I think it was a little bit of everything. We one of our biggest thing that we worked on all the time, especially as a roving manager, was trying to figure out ways to generate more income. I know the company pushed heavily into trying to do more private events where people could actually rent the arcade out for birthday parties and different events, and that brought in a lot of money that they hadn't been able to realize, maybe, that was going to some of the other venues. It's like, okay, if you're going to have a birthday party, the kids were like, well, we're going to go to Chuck E. Cheese,
right?
Because Aladdin's won't let us have cake and punch and all of that stuff. So we actually started running cooperative agreements with the local pizzeria, the local birthday cake place, and we started to get special pricing from them, so we could offer birthday packages that then we could market to families. That helped. Of course, the other big thing that we did as rovers, of course, was to help cut down on any internal monetary loss through theft, because it's an all cash business, so you have to.
I forget the word. What's the term for that? The leakage or something, or? Yeah,
I mean, and there's a certain percentage you factor in, but I mean, there were some stores that I encountered that it was $10,000 to $15,000 a week going out of a store. So yeah, so we were key in helping to do that. Always. I mean, we had an entire division of nothing but marketing that would sit down and go, how can we maximize this square footage to fit more games on the floor? How can we get a better flow? Is our token per pricing right? One of the things they started to do in the later years was to bring in new row bill changers that would accept higher denomination bills, because the early changers we had, they would accept dollars and $5 bills. And the other higher volume ones then allowed us to do coin pricing or token pricing to try to get those 10s and those 20s from people, and increase our sales. So I think it was a lot of things coming together that helped. I think the other thing that obviously helped too is as technology improved, which was the double-edged sword that eventually put us out of business, and was the fact that they could make such good quality home games, was the fact that the arcade games themselves, the experience in the arcade was getting better with our simulator style games, and the higher end equipment that we were putting in the arcades. So I think that's really where we've seen increased costs from, and the arcades that were going away were those real tiny locations where they just couldn't implement some of them games because they never had the volume. It's hard to send a $25,000 sit down simulator game to a store that only has floor space for 50 games. Because they just don't have the volume to support it. So
can't put Afterburner in a tiny little 8x10 room. Just can't do it.
No, I mean, you need the room, and you need, because that needs its own stage, so to speak, because the part of that whole experience of having a game like that in the store is not only you playing it, but it's having your friends with you watching you play it.
Yeah.
And, and you talked about the military guys lined up to play that. It's funny that in all of the arcades across the country that I went in the mall shopping centers, the most loyal video game players I had in my arcades were the military recruiters that were in the mall.
I don't doubt it.
Come down and play video games.
So you were in a Roving Manager, and so LeMans, Aladdin's, Bally's, and so did they offer you some career advancement?
Yeah, I mean there was always a chance to move up generally with Aladdin's. I enjoyed some of the time in the office, and there were some offers to stay in the corporate office or work in their what we call tech service department. Because what happened in the stores is, for all the listeners, obviously when you open up the back of a arcade game, everything inside the cabinet is broken down into components. Whether it be monitor or the motherboard, as we used to call it, or the power supply. And each of those components were only troubleshooted to a certain level by a store manager. And then if working with tech services, if it was deemed to be a defective, say, motherboard, that would get packaged and shipped to Franklin Park, where tech services staff would repair it and send it back. Or they would send you an advanced replacement. If it was a popular game, we kept a lot of stuff on hand and repair things that way. So there were some offers of being able to do that, but I never really wanted to settle in that big of a city. So and plus I loved being in the field more so. So but yeah, there was definitely advancement opportunity if you were willing to move around. If you were just an attendant in the local store, you either had to plot or wait for the manager to die to be able to get his job. They're not going to promote an attendant to an area manager, obviously. So, but if you were younger and you were wanting to learn more and willing to and say, hey, I will move to any place you want to send me to be a store manager or being an assistant manager in some of our bigger locations, there was definitely an opportunity for quite a number of years for advancement.
That's awesome. So I have a couple more questions. One is from the chat again. DJ asks, how did you handle games that went down? Because you mentioned you like being in the field. So how did you handle a game that would go down?
Yeah, obviously you didn't want to see games go down because if the game is down, it's dead floor space. You're not making any money. So they were very aggressive about getting games fixed, and we had very specific flow charts for managers to go through to try to troubleshoot a game as quickly as possible. And as a roving manager and area managers, regional managers, the company would actually send out printouts every week to us that would give a game, what they called a games down report. So when you did a collection on a game, you had to write the number of games the number of days that game was down. And then the company in the comment section wanted to know what the status was on getting that game back up. Is a part on order? has a board been sent in for what we call R&R, repair and return? So they wanted to track that, and that's another position that a rover would be used for, is that they would watch those games down lists, and they would say, okay, here's this store in, just say, Bettendorf, Iowa. For instance, it says, this manager runs a lot of number of days down on a game. Maybe we should go there and help see if we can do a little in-store education, some training.
Sure.
To help them. And, so there was the thing that used to frustrate me the most on game repair is we would hire some store managers that would be like new grads from like DeVry or someplace like that, who are like, hey, I graduated with this electronics thing, so I'm not going to use your flow chart on how to fix this game.
Nice.
I'm going to go to step 12, and I remember one game was down for a while, and this one manager's telling me it doesn't work. I've been working on it for so long. I said, did you go through the flow chart? Well, no, I don't do it. I said, get your ohm meter. What's the number one step on the flow chart? Well, take the ohm meter and touch the two plugs on the outlet to see if you get what we call a continuity read. And gee, there's nothing there. And go to look at the game, and what had happened, this game was down for like 3-4 days. Some kid, we figure, had reached up on top of the game and turned the switch off.
Simple.
That's why it was down. Yeah.
So my gosh.
So after that simple, step one, reach up, turn the switch on, game's up, making money.
If you had say a Dragon's Lair, and the Laserdisc player was out, and you just know you're not going to be able to fix it because you're going to have to send the thing out. It's going to take days, weeks, whatever. Did you ever just push games into the corner or in a back room if they were just taking up space, or were they dead weight and you called somebody to have them come get them and put a new game in place?
Yeah, if it was going to be something that was going to be down that they weren't going to be replacing, we would try to get them off the floor, or maybe rearrange some games to get games wrapped around it to try to hide it until a truck would come to pick it up. But and there were some games that that I would go into the stores and they would literally tell me, we're not picking up this game. This game can be scrapped at location. And that means you would take it out in the back hallway of the mall, because you always had generally a service door, and you would take it out back there, and you would take a sledgehammer and you'd bust it apart.
Whoa!
And you would basically throw it in your dumpster.
Chuck E. Cheese had a policy; all their games got destroyed.
So are there any games that you put a sledgehammer to that you regret, or maybe you don't regret?
Well, a lot of I'm sure I probably smashed a good number of Space Invaders and Defenders and Stargates and things like that. A lot of them we were fortunate enough to where they would allow us to sell some games too.
Oh, that's good.
And in the growth time, that was great, because I could make a few calls locally, and there's some mom and pop guy that's got some route in a bar that would buy our used games.
That makes sense.
But yeah, some of them were just so old that, in the cabinets, so beat up over the years that there really wasn't much serviceable to them anymore.
So, maybe a final question here. Sounds like you started working right when the video game crash started, but then there was sort of a death ride upwards for Bally, because they kept buying people out and were able to be profitable through the late 80s. And so then you're offered this, job in New York, which I don't know if we talked about, but you had this sort of, really a 10-year or 11-year period with this company. What was that like for you, in a nutshell? And do you miss it, or would you trade it for anything?
But looking back, the one of the great things working with Aladdin's Castle, obviously the game, seeing the technology evolve and everything was great, but the people that I got to work with, the other roving managers, area managers, and that was where I got basically a college education in management. So that was great, because later on in life I would go from that to a law enforcement career to now working as a completely online marketer and stuff. So so I learned a lot about business and quite granted, a lot of what not to do
Sure.
in some hands of business. But obviously, the people I worked with that I met are fantastic, and I'm really thankful today that we've got the Facebook and the internet to be able to reconnect with some of these people. I know you had started a group,
Yeah.
For Aladdin's Castle, and I know maybe your purpose in why you started the group was different than what you found.
Very true.
From the standpoint of you started it, you had said because you had this gamers experience,
Yeah.
and now are finding out that a lot of the people that join the group are former employees
Yeah,
that
actually-
want to share memories of working there.
Most of them are employees. It's really kind of cool. I love popping in there and people share pictures and stuff, and I just think it's a hoot.
Yeah, and so as far as at the end, I knew it was time to get out. When I was in Iowa and my store closed, and I knew the store closing was coming, because there would be some days that I would work there and would literally have like a deposit for the day of like $5 or $12. So
$12.
Yeah,
that's
and-
crazy.
Yeah, but here's the thing is that they had to decide at what point how much money a day are you losing versus what it's going to cost you to buy out a lease.
Yeah, so maybe just take the loss and ride it out.
They that location was probably open a year longer than it should have been open, but and that was in Fort Dodge, Iowa. But at the time that was closing, the company called me and they said, "Well, of course you've got this myriad of experience. We really don't want to lose you, and we'd like to offer you an area manager's job in New York State." And I said, "Well, sounds good." I said, "What's it pay?" And they said, "Well, because of your years with the company and your position as a rover and all these different things, they're like, you're really at the high end of our field management level pay structure." So they said, what we can do is we can give you a cost of living adjustment because you would be going to New York. And so we'll give you an extra $25 a week.
Oh, thanks.
Yeah.
Thanks.
So I called a store manager in New York and just asked him, hey, this, I'm thinking about taking this. And the guy on the phone is like, you will starve to death if you come here. He's like, I'm a store manager, but he's like, I'm a retired Air Force person who basically lives on his pension, and my wife is like some kind of a doctor. He's like, I work at Aladdin's because I like video games, and this is like beer money for me.
Oh, that's funny.
He's like, you can't buy. He said you can't get an apartment, for $1,500, $2,000 a month. He's like, there's no way you can afford to live here. So I called Bally's back, and I'm like, well, I said appreciate the offer, and they threw some other offers out, and my wife at the time, she's like, maybe it's just time to just segue into a different career. So I did leave with very mixed emotions, because I did love the corporate people and the people that I worked with in the field, and I love working on video games. So that's I do miss that. Yeah,
we do too. To a fault.
Yeah, well, and that's that would when you were doing the arcade news segment.
Yeah.
I was going to chime in, with my bit of arcade news, just to let you know that Aladdin's Castle's out of business.
Oh, completely.
And, so it was the same. I still go, when I'm traveling. It's kind of interesting when I'm traveling or on business, or my wife and I are traveling, vacation or something. I will sometimes go out of my way to a mall that I know I worked at as a rover to see if that arcade is still there. Because some of the arcades, if you travel around, the arcades are still there, and they look, sometimes like they did back in the day. But of course, now they're owned by, a private mom and pop kind of thing.
Sure.
And so it's just interesting to go in there and maybe have some conversations with the manager and say, yeah, I helped open this store back in, 85 or whatever. And, and give them a little history about their store. So it's very nostalgic, and I'd have, like I said, boxes of Aladdin's Castle token bags. I'm sure you guys probably remember the little velvet token bags from around Christmas time you could buy.
I don't have those, but I do have a token keeper, a little plastic thing.
Okay. Okay, is that the one with the string around the neck, the token tubes we used to call them?
Yep, it's kind of like a lanyard, but you can keep your tokens, and I have one of those.
Yeah. I was going through some stuff here the other day and came across a box of them. So I'm like, yeah. So it's like I couldn't throw this stuff away.
You still have those flow charts?
Yeah, I've got all that kind of stuff.
Oh, we've got to start scanning. We're gonna have a scan party or something.
I will tell you guys.
I got a huge group of what they called tech tips back in the day. And they were sent out to store managers to address common problems in specific games.
Okay,
the one that comes to mind is that there is a part or component in the power supply of a pole position video game that always fails.
Yeah.
And you used to be able to buy the replacement part at Radio Shack, of course. But it specifically was a tip on, okay, when it fails, here's how you're going to replace it, and here's a modification you're going to do to keep it from happening again.
Yeah.
So those tech tips would go out for, all these different games. So yeah, I've probably got boxes of different things. So.
Sense circuit.
Now I will tell you, there is one Aladdin's Castle still in business.
Mm-hmm.
It's in Quincy, Illinois, at 3423 Quincy Mall in Quincy, Illinois. 217-222-5074. And I bet it's just a privately owned thing now.
Yeah, I worked that store at the Rover. So
Cool.
I remember that one.
That's hilarious.
Yeah, so I mean it's I remember when the store in Fort Dodge, Iowa was closing, the truck driver that came to pick up the games, he actually got a ladder and stuff, and he took down the Aladdin's Castle neon sign on the front of the store. And I said, all this has got to go back to corporate too. He said, no. He said, I collect this stuff. He's like, corporate's just going to leave it here for the mall to throw away.
Yeah.
He's like, no, I'm taking it down. I'm keeping it.
Oh, that's cool. I wish I had the Aladdin's Castle logo. I suppose I could have one made now, but.
Yeah, but I mean, that would be so cool to go back now and have something like that. And I mean, I have a Bally's LeMan's Family Fun Center license plate.
Oh, that's cool.
That they had printed and different, awards from my time with Aladdin's, but I do miss, I miss that environment and miss a lot of the people I worked with, because the people I worked with are what really made the job enjoyable. And, and I love having my hands in anything electrical and repairing stuff. And, so yeah, it was great times.
Awesome. Well, listen, Randy, I just want to thank you for being on the show. It's been an awesome night. I love that you have such good stories.
Yeah, it's been a great trip down memory lane, and some of the updates that you were given back earlier, the songs and stuff that were popular in 1984. Yeah, that's my wife's, one of her favorite movies was Footloose.
That's awesome.
Yeah. She was of course 14 at the time.
We're glad to be of service.
But no, it was great. I enjoyed, like I said, chatting about it, and and I look forward to the opportunity to being on a playing card.
Oh, that'd be great. And who knows? Maybe we'll have you on for part 2, Randy Donahue part 2. I think awesome.
I'm sure there's more stories I can come up with.
Well, thanks again for being on the show, and everybody in the chat, thanks for listening in. It's the double R's, it's Arcade Radio, and we are glad to have you along. Please join the conversation anytime at arcaderadio.com. Email us at react@arcaderadio.com. Follow us on iTunes, Google Play, and SoundCloud, and listen in next 2 weeks from now when we have Walter Day on April 13th. This is Arcade Radio, signing off.
This is where we dance
like crazy man. I'm doing the funky chicken.
I'm doing the rusty chicken.
I'm doing the choke the chicken.
Ew! Sorry.
Yeah, that was a loud one.
I love this thing.
Little fart noise.
Yeah, I have a gun. It's a Minions gun.
Nice end to the stream, I'm telling you.